Now let's head to Queensland, and the Premier Anna Bligh and LNP leader Campbell Newman have been making their final moves on the campaign trail. Various polls are predicting Campbell Newman will win the election by nothing short of a landslide. For more, we're joined now by the ABC's election analyst Antony Green from Brisbane. Antony, good morning to you. Based on those latest polls, how comprehensive will this purported victory by the LNP be?
Well, we haven't seen any polls since last weekend, but they were showing 10%. We'll have some more polls tomorrow, and I haven't heard anything to indicate that the trend won't continue to those polls. We had that poll in Ashgrove this week, which did come out, which showed a swing of 11% and indicated Campbell Newman would easily win the seat he's contesting. And that removes that last hurdle that the Labor Party was trying to use to argue against electing the LNP, that perhaps they'd be elected but without a premier.
Earlier in the campaign, there appeared to be some traction for Kate Jones against Campbell Newman in Ashgrove, but it appears Queenslanders living in that seat have, according to that latest poll, have firmly made up their minds and will play their not insubstantial part in making Campbell Newman the next premier.
Yeah, I think in the end, when you come to the last week, people focus on who they're going to vote for and who's going to be government after the election. And I think we've seen some other minor parties struggle to get some traction. The Greens haven't had a lot of attention. Katter's Australian Party seemed to have sort of faded out during the campaign. I think in the end people have focused on the fact there are two choices for Premier, Anna Bligh or Campbell Newman, and that's the choice that people have come to think about in Ashgrove as well as across the state as a whole.
Now, Greater Brisbane is set, according to that latest poll last week, to be something of a political killing zone for Labor. The party has a lot of its seats there. How important is it from the party's long-term view that they try to sandbag and hold those seats it holds in regional Queensland?
Well, Brisbane holds 34 of the... Labor holds 34 of the 40 seats in Greater Brisbane. There's 49 dotted across the rest of the state, about 16 on the Golden Sunshine Coast, which leaves a balance of a little over 30 in the rest of the state. Queensland is the most regional state. It's the state where there's more seats away from the capital city than in any other state in the country. And regional issues are at play. Campbell Newman is from Brisbane. He's the first Conservative leader in a century to come from Brisbane itself. And that's an indication that the LNP views that winning seats in Brisbane is how they get into government. For the Labor Party to continue to be a statewide party, they need to hang on to a few seats in the north, in Cairns and in Townsville, because the Labor Party used to always like to paint the old Liberal and National parties as not representing all of Queensland, only parts of Queensland. And for Labor to continue with that sort of historical perception of themselves, they've got to hold on to seats in the north. And currently they hold 3 seats in Cairns, 3 in Townsville, Mackay, Rockhampton. They hold those sorts of seats, which is important for them to hold at this election.
Not only are there concerns within Labor, Antony, of losing government comprehensively, but also losing potential new leaders if, as expected, Anna Bligh resigns in the wake of a Labor defeat, particularly Andrew Fraser, the Deputy Premier, who holds the Brisbane seat of Mount Coota by a fairly slim margin. I noticed Kevin Rudd was campaigning with him there last night. What's the outlook for that seat in particular?
Well, if there's a 10% swing, he holds it with a margin of about 5%. So, you're talking about it's very unlikely they could hold that if the statewide swing occurs. You've also got cities like Greenslopes. Cameron Dick is the Education Minister, Industrial Relations Minister. He'd be another potential leader. He's sitting on 7%. Jeff Wilson, the Health Minister in Ferny Grove, is also on a very marginal seat. So the Labor Party could lose over half of its ministry. They've also already got several retirements occurring at this election. So if they're reduced to only a rump of Parliament, it'll take them a long time to come back, partly because they'll have lost most of their talent, which is in seats they're likely to lose. That's
right. Now, you mentioned the minor party before. Katter's Australian Party, what are the chances of that party cracking a seat in this election?
Well, they hold 2 seats currently due to the defection of LNP members. One of those seats, Dalrymple, have a strong chance of holding. Beaudesert, which is in the south of the state, Aidan McLinden, who's named as the party state leader, he's got a real battle on his hands. That's a tough seat for him to hold. But the Katter family might win Mount Isa, where Rob Katter, Bob's son, is standing as the 3rd generation of the Katters to go into Parliament. He's got a strong chance of winning that seat from Labor, a sign of how poorly Labor's doing in the north of the state.
If it is a really big electoral loss for Labor in Queensland, what do you see as the possible federal implications for Queensland federal Labor MPs?
Well, Labor already had a bad result last time. And statewide polls are indicating maybe Labor would lose another 2 to 3% at the federal election, which only costs them another seat or 2. The fate of the Gillard government rests in New South Wales and Victoria, not in Queensland. They had their bad election last time. Potentially, if Campbell Newman wins the election and has a difficult first year, which costs the LNP votes, there is the chance Labor could recover the next federal election in Queensland. But realistically, Labor's only had one good result in Queensland in the last 15 years. If people think that the federal election is going to be decided in Queensland, they need to look at New South Wales. The Labor Party, on polling, could lose 20 seats in New South Wales, which dwarfs any losses they'd have in Queensland.
Yeah, indeed it would. Now, finally, Antony Green, you expect to break a record tomorrow night as to how early you may call this election?
Well, we called the 2001 election at 6:40. The difference in Queensland is there's no upper house, and that substantially speeds up the count. They're not hunting around in upper house ballot boxes looking for ballot papers. So that's why the count always comes in much quicker in Queensland. And look, we'll know the result before 7 o'clock. On the votes, I mean, we knew the result in New South Wales before 7, but that wasn't based on the results, that's based on the polls. The same applies tomorrow, but the count does come in much quicker in Queensland than it did in New South Wales, even in a landslide.
Yeah, a long night or short. We wish you well tomorrow night. Antony Green, thank you.